When we go and 500, 600 years ago, when Jinghe go down to Southeast Asia, there are no stories of Chinese killing the local indigenous people and take their land and resources. All they have is Chinese bring goods, do trade, leave people behind, be friendly with them, and help them to have a lot of cultural exchanges.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show, Charles and Friends. Now, for this episode, I have with me my friend Raymond. Tell us about you first.
Yeah, look, thanks, Charles. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I actually was born in Hong Kong, but I moved to Australia when I was young, and I was there for 20 years before I come back to China. I started my own private equity business in China about 10 years ago now, in partnership with CGN Group.
I met Raymond. We were working together on his renewable energies fund, and Raymond did a wonderful job. He was very, very successful. These are very big issues with climate change problems that we're facing today.
Really. Yeah, and we already have assets under management, and we're seeing a lot of growth in the area. But it's also a sector that needs a lot of work to get it right.
On the macro side, we've seen what happened this year. For example, we've seen drought, flooding, and heat unrivaled in terms of temperature in history, in terms of the amount of heat that even Europe has seen. The Rhine River drying up. I think overall, this climate change is becoming something that really should be seriously attended to. But unfortunately, I don't see major global collaboration in this sector in a serious way. People are concerned about politics, about ideology, about things of that type.
Let's be honest about it. There's a lot of vested interest in the fossil fuel sector, right? Okay. And the other thing is, look, I'm a data scientist by training, so I understand the science. But there are a lot of people, because of their vested interest, are trying to push it away. But you're absolutely on the ball. We're really seeing the effects. You and I talk about for many years. It's never about the average temperature only. It's really about the extreme events. Unfortunately, it's going to hit stronger and stronger, harder and harder. But as any good old saying in any crisis, there are opportunities. We see that China in particular is now really taking the global leadership in decarbonization, and it's just playing to the theme of high quality growth that President Xi is portraying. And we think that it's a super exciting, because if it's doing well, it's actually saving money and improving the sustainability of the economy, and actually lowering the long-term cost when you look at it on a totality basis.
Yes. In addition to that, we talk about climate change in terms of the immediate impact on what happens to the planet, but the other part which will happen immediately is the ramifications for global food supply. We're going to see serious declines in global food production, which will lead to global instability, potentially war and conflict. And all of these things just spread out all over the world. And especially since, I think it was last week, the global world population has reached 8 billion last week, according to UN figures. So increased population, less food, less fresh water, all of this. I think for you, who have been doing this for quite some time now, in terms of sustainability, you must feel pretty bad about how things are moving worldwide.
Charles, we've been around for a long time and seen a lot, and we're both students of history. The world traveled with a certain momentum. Things happen not because of what happened today, but it happens on the back of many series of events. And so it's nothing to feel bad about personally. But I think as an individual, we all have an obligation to do the right thing for the Mother Earth. So how can we actually invest in the vision of making a world a better place, and at the same time make money, right? When you invest, it's really about creating the risk-adjusted return. But it's not just about the money, in my personal opinion. It's about investing to make the society better as a whole, to make it more sustainable so we can make more money over time. In particular, when you look at what we do, we invest insurance monies, pensioners' money. Our stakeholders are the one that that the millions of savers. We have an obligation and a moral responsibility to make the world a better place, so that our stakeholders not only make the money, but they have a better life in general. I think that the obligation is on all of us. But
yes.
We do feel that some of our partners and our colleagues aren't really playing into it. But I never see it as a must. I think we need to be a role model, to actually lead by examples.
On that note, I think we go back to what President Xi's view is in terms of higher quality growth. It's more than a question of just sustainability. There's also the issue of what does modernization mean? What does common prosperity mean? We have to look at all of these in very serious ways, because common prosperity means, okay, China has alleviated extreme poverty, but there's still a lot of people living in the rural areas who don't have the things which people who live in the cities have. And yes, of course, we have many multi-billionaires in America, but we also have more than 500,000 who live on the streets or homeless. So social responsibility is also very, very significant in terms of looking at investment. So more than climate change, but what is good for society as a whole, what is good for all the people, not just a few people. These are things which really should be taken into account.
Yeah, I think, Charles, I think you're spot on. We talk a lot about it. In China, there's this concept of 五位一体, which is the 5 pillars growth or 5 pillars development as a whole. And when President Xi come up with this high quality growth concept, I reckon President Xi had effectively pressed the level up button. If you're thinking about a gaming context, we're just leveling up. My personal view is that the 20th Party Congress has effectively unleashed a new game. And that's after years and years of preparation. But I did see a lot of confusion in the West, in particular where the media portrayed it. Now to explain to my Western layman kind of friends, I basically say what President Xi and Beijing is looking to do is focus on growing the overall productivity, focus on growing the middle class, which is really common prosperity, focus on synergistic collaborative growth, and focus on what you talk about: food security, energy security, water security, and personal security. This is what they feel, and even wealth security. Right? This is, I think personally, as I talk to my friends in the West, this is what common prosperity in China and high quality growth is really about. In fact, if you read the narratives published by Beijing, it is really to use high quality growth to deliver common prosperity to the people of China.
In terms of delivering high quality growth, Raymond, you and I have talked about this. There is no supply chain in the world today, or even in human history, that is as efficient as what China has built in terms of infrastructure, which means using the least resources to produce the most in terms of value and needs of society. So protecting the security of the supply chain is also very significant. What I've seen, especially in the last 5 years, which is really, I think, very interesting, now that with new rail lines, Vietnam has asked China to build a high-speed rail for them, and high-speed rail going into Cambodia, to Thailand, and the new one in Indonesia. All this infrastructure will enhance efficiency, which means on the sustainability side, uses less energy and less resources of the earth to produce more things for the people. But also, this efficiency will also enhance the size of the market, which creates further efficiencies in terms of economies of scale. So I think what you described in terms of what the new vision is, I add in the supply chain and the protection of the supply chain and this regional cooperation and collaboration, which is really becoming very, very significant. I've even heard about the Gulf Cooperation Council. The 6 countries of the Gulf are now talking with China about creating a free trade zone, and eventually might join the RCEP. All of this are political and economic regional collaboration mechanism that will extend further into this efficiency and supply chain.
You're absolutely spot on. Charles, it's about supply chain. It's also about productivity, how productive the economy is.
Right.
And China, just giving a continental scale of China, right? If you think about China getting industrialized, we've got 1.4 billion people industrialized. If you think about the existing West, you add them all up, there's less than 1 billion people, right? Yeah. So the scale of industrialization out of China is ginormous. And with that, you just got a lot of competitive advantages coming out of it across different regions. And I think where Beijing is really, President Xi is really pushing to, it's an open mindset. When you talk about the dual circulation, it's really about how do we ensure that the circulation in China works, right? So things get moving very efficiently to create that scale, the supply chain, the productivity, but also work with the rest of the world to take in the best elements of it and also work with them collaboratively to make them a success as well and create a two wheels working together hand in hand, a dual engine for the world. And I think there's a grand vision. And it's actually something that makes a lot of sense for the world.
Absolutely.
It's good for world peace, by the way. I personally think that, hey, if you want peace, you want to make money out of each other. And I think that's exactly where Beijing is pointing towards.
So you're very optimistic about how things are moving, the direction.
Look, I think the direction, President Xi had said it a number of years ago, the changing world order in 100 years. If you want to have a very Western layman term, you can watch the Ray Dalio's cartoon.
Yes.
He's got that. I said it to you before. He's got a changing world order cartoon, which basically it's a simplified version of how Beijing sees the world moving. Because everyone a history of a student of histories, right? I think. Look, am I optimistic? I think what's really different this time around, Charles, is that China, you're Chinese, we're Chinese, huh? We're African Chinese. When you look at China, we've been always very inward focused. We're not people that go around and bash people around, push people around. When we go and 500, 600 years ago, when Jing He go down to Southeast Asia, there are no stories of Chinese killing the local indigenous people and take their land and resources. All they have is Chinese bring goods, do trade, leave people behind, be friendly with them, and help them to have a lot of cultural exchanges, right? So I think the Chinese civilization have always been, relatively benevolent, if you allow me to use that word. And I think that's I agree with.
Use the word tolerant. Use the word
tolerant. Is it tolerant? Is it right? Okay. And I agree with President Xi. If China is able to deliver the vision that set out in the 19th plenary 5 years ago, China will bring a very different atmosphere or environment to the rest of the world. You can have a very, very strong industrialized power where it succeeded not by exploiting other people, but actually working really, really hard. In fact, exploiting themselves, in particular in your generation, to get industrialized. And in fact, instead of pushing people around, I think China is working with people, sharing the benefit, and trying to make the rest of the world better, to make the pie bigger, and a lot of sharing. And it's just a very different world compared to where we were in the last 500-600 years. So it's very exciting. However, Charles, while we're very optimistic, in the next 10, 20 years, as what we said just then, the momentum just couldn't, these things are built over many, many years. The momentum, the trends are clear, but we're going to have some hoops along the way.
Well, even more than that, I think what's really significant is more and more countries of the global south, as we see the Middle East, the ASEAN countries, and African countries, the Central Asian countries, are looking more and more toward the China model of seeking trade, production, commerce, collaboration, rather than political formations. And what we see today, it's very clear. Everybody is looking for better lives for their people, especially the ASEAN countries have grown a lot over the last decade. And much of it is becoming part of the supply chain for China, in intermediary goods or even raw materials. And it's a wonderful thing where both sides really benefit. Now, what's really amazing is how the Middle East is joining the party.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. I went to Middle East twice. I'm going there next week. They draw a lot of comfort by the new party Congress. They're really seeing the party coming together to share the same vision outlined by President Xi. They, in fact, for them, they wanted to ride on the long-term quality growth of China as well. And they really see that benefit that you just talked about. And China is always a country that's willing to share. Say, for example, the UAE were able to get the rights to produce Sinopharm in Middle East, which really helped Middle East to inoculate really, really fast. And President Xi did honor the commitment to make vaccine as a public goods, which helped to contribute to the recovery of the developing world, even though it's still very slow. But I think with the due circulation, with President Xi now go back out and have these high-level meetings with leaders, I think you're right. We're going to see a lot more collaboration in the next 12 months. However, I think that there are also dark clouds in the horizon as well, as you would expect.
But even your country, even your government is making positive overtures.
Absolutely.
Even the Aussies.
Look, Australians, this is what happened, right? Western Australia is a major beneficiary of trade with China. They have a 19-point swing in this year election in May 2022. I talked to some of my mates. I went to Perth. One of our common friends that I introduced you, Mark Hutchison. He's now chairing FFI, being the CEO of Fortescue Futures Industry. So I went to Perth and met up with a few people. They said, look, we made a lot of money out of the Chinese. We know so many Chinese. These are nice guys. What's wrong? Who are we building military against? Our largest trading partner? What the heck?
It's ridiculous, right?
It doesn't make any sense, right? So I think China is very different to Soviet Union, right? We have so much interactions with the rest of the world, so many relatives. People know that Chinese are not crazy, right? They're not harmful people.
Well, you saw what happened in Bali, right? This is the first time in 6 years that an Australian prime minister actually talked about China as our major trading partner. For the last couple of years, they wouldn't even talk about that. It shows how politics and ideology overwhelm reality.
No, ultimately, Charles, you have been a diplomat, right? For those that who don't know you, you were a JD, at UPenn, and then you gave that up, and you turned yourselves to be the secretary to Wang Hua in
United Nations, yeah.
And you worked there for 13 years. So you're diplomats, and there are only interests amongst countries. There are no loyalties as such. At the end, the ideology actually help a bit, but people need to have a living.
People need to have a living. Now, jokingly, my Singaporean friends said it wasn't the G20. They said it in a positive way. It was the She-20. because all the world's attention was actually at the bilateral sessions that President Xi had with all the other heads of state.
Charles, I think as ethnic Chinese that have, moved to Western countries for many, many years, you did 30 years, I did 20. I still have my family homes in Australia. I still see myself an Australian. I'm very happy and proud that China has moved up, because when I was an immigrant, I always got looked down in a way.
Even though you're very tall.
Even though I'm very tall, I'm almost 2 meters tall. But now we definitely contributing positively to the world, despite the rhetorics. And I'm personally, you and I are both trying to do to be the ambassador of China. We are Western trained. It is upon us to actually share this know-how with our partners globally, to encourage global trade, and hopefully we'll make the world a better place, and we'll help our friends in the West make great money out of China, and we'll also make China a better place along the way, and we'll help Chinese to make great money out of the West and the rest of the world, make the pie bigger, and everyone enjoy life better. I think that's upon us.
Absolutely. That's what we should be doing. The other part, which I think I want to hear your view on, is something that I find is growing very, very rapidly, is this whole South-South collaboration. It's something that it's increasingly obvious that the global South is not very enthused about participating in political alliances or military alliances, are much more interested in peace and development. And it's very pragmatic now. And I think the population has also become much more sophisticated in many developing countries in recognizing that China delivers what it promises. What the Singaporean friend said to me about She-20 instead of G20, it means a number of things. I think it means basically three things. Number one, G20 was supposed to address global financial issues. This was formed after the financial crisis, the great financial crisis, right? Collaboration in addressing financial problems, restart engines of growth in the world's economy, and so on and so forth. But it's become highly, highly political. Pressure to condemn Russia over the Ukrainian conflict, attempts to form alliances to suppress China further. This is by the US and so on and so forth. Indonesia, being the host country, really had a hard time in trying to hold it all together. So that's the first reason. The second reason they call it She-20 is because the whole world's attention and all the press attention was focused on who President Xi was meeting and what was discussed. Because there were a number of breakthroughs, I think, is interesting. The 3-hour meeting with President Biden, between Biden and Xi, was very significant. And after the meeting with your prime minister, Albanese was really positive. He gave a really strong positive tone. And not only that, for the first time, he actually declared that trade with China is bigger than Australia's trade with China is bigger than Australia's trade with Japan, Korea, and the United States combined. So to put it in that context is really significant. So I think the second part was global attention was on President Xi. And the third part, Xi 20, I think, aside from those two issues, is President Xi has been locked up with the coronavirus for 2 years, for 2.5 years. So this is coming back out on the stage. So I think Xi 20 had occurred. Now let's see what happens in APAC.
I agree with you, and I think it's very exciting to have a C20 in a way. And with APAC, I think what you're seeing is Vietnam being the first to jump out to show a strong friendship with China, had really set the tone for the overall APAC. I think you said it before, there are a lot of collaboration amongst the APAC countries. I think that's where that's where APAC and China is going to travel to. You probably have already seen the Japanese Prime Minister also met up with President Xi. The tone's actually quite positive as well. I've just been to Tokyo 2 weeks ago. My Japanese partners are telling me, look, that they're also very much into doing more business in China. That this year, FDI in China has grown 15%. The Germans leading the way with 30% up. Japanese are up 27%. So if anything, you follow the money, right?
Yeah, actually, it's particularly interesting. So you're talking about capital account. So the surplus of the capital account, but the current account has been even more significant. China's positive trade surplus has been massive. And I think it's the first time in history that Korea, Japan, and Germany, the three major manufacturing powerhouses other than China, actually all three had a trade deficit with China. You're talking about Germany. I think the situation with Germany is really quite serious. The hollowing out of industries because they can no longer be competitive with these energy prices and raw material prices, and the collapse of the euro against the dollar. So it's not looking good for the next couple of quarters, maybe for the next couple of years for Europe.
There's a huge industrialization happening in Europe right now. You talk to your friends. You and I last spoke. You already talked about it. I talked to a number of them along the way. People are getting very worried, right? There's this industrialization in Europe right now. Industries are moving to US and China. The two of them are the biggest beneficiaries out of it. Now, I really feel in the near term, you just highlighted, Charles, that there are a lot of hurdles. You can't expect there are going to be wars coming. Food security is going to be a major problem. This year, we're still fine because there are a lot of stockpiling. But if you look at India, you look at China, they already put food security as #1 priority. I think you're going to lack of fertilizers. We're going to lose a lot of crops in the next 6 months. And people are getting freezed out in Europe right now. It's very worrying in the near term. And let's not forget, the very aggressive monetary policies from the West it's going to be a boomerang. It's going to come and hurt them. I keep saying to people, look, if printing money could have resolved economic problems, then we wouldn't have any economic problems in the last 5,000 years, ever since we come up with the concept of money, right? What solves problems is productivity. At the moment, the world's collective productivity is actually reducing, with China improving, but the rest of the world is declining in a way. And ASEAN countries is improving. So look, you were when we first met 5-6 years ago, you're talking about the rise of Asia, having China as its core. I think, look, it's definitely coming. I think India is now doing a lot better under Moody's as well. So we're going to have some really strong engines firing up. Exciting time, but it's going to be turbulence in the next few years. So put on your seatbelt.
Absolutely. And in my case, sitting in Beijing, sitting in Hong Kong, I have to say that we're actually quite lucky, especially those of us in China.
Yeah, if I'm an investor, I'll definitely start thinking about my asset allocation. I'll definitely put money into buy productive assets.
That's right.
That's why I invest in wind farms. I invest in solar farms. I invest in energy transition. I buy houses in Australia. It's like, when you buy in Australia, you're really buying a commodity play, right? Where India and China is going to buy a lot of it. So we're going to be first-class citizen of Asia. We always would be. And then when you buy into China, you're really buying into productivity, productive assets. Even in renminbi, it's actually backed by productivity. So I think as a CIO, people need to really think about the asset allocation.
Very good. Very good. So let's continue to be optimistic, Raymond. And I hope you continue to bring foreign investments into China and make very productive assets and produce very productive assets and develop them, and continue to work with your friends and make sure Australia becomes more reasonable with China. Relationship.
Let's work together. It's our mission. It's not going to be easy, Charles, but we'll get there. No, it's upon us to do it. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for having me.
That's all for today. Thank you.
Right. Bye.
See you again soon. Bye-bye.